No, can you clarify for us what happened with the president's dogs? There's some reports that one of them was involved in a biting incident. Can you clarify exactly what happened?
Sure. Champion Major, the president and first lady's dogs, members of the family, are still getting acclimated and accustomed to their new surroundings and new people. And on Monday, the first family's younger dog, Major, was surprised by an unfamiliar person and reacted in a way that resulted in a minor injury to the individual, which was handled by the White House Medical Unit with no further treatment needed. It had been previously planned already for the dogs to be cared for by family friends in Delaware during Dr. Biden's travels to military bases this week. She has a 3-day trip this week, and the dogs will return to the White House soon. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Thank you, Jen. 2 questions for you. First off, House Democrats are preparing to bring back earmarks as part of an effort to build support for infrastructure legislation. Does President Biden support the return of earmarks, and are there specific restrictions that he would seek to prevent the kind of abuse that has occurred in the past?
Sure. Well, we don't have an infrastructure bill yet. Don't even know that it will be an infrastructure bill. And in terms of what it will look like and what the negotiations will require, we are happy to have that conversation when it's appropriate. But right now, we're focused on the American Rescue Plan, so we're not going to get ahead of the legislative strategy for a future bill.
Biden's position on earmarks more broadly?
I don't think anything has changed about his position. He obviously was in Congress for 36 years, but in terms of what it will look like or what restrictions would be on a new package, I'm sure he'll hear from and we're eager to listen to members of both parties and about their views on this issue, and we'll certainly factor it in as we put together a new his next step in the Build Back Better agenda.
The second question, the Indian government has threatened to jail employees at Facebook and Twitter if they do not comply with the government's data requests or requests that they take down accounts associated with these farmers' protests that have been ongoing for months now. What is the administration's view of a foreign government threatening to jail employees at U.S. companies?
Well, certainly we believe in freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of expression, and it is a concern that the president and others at the highest level raise at every opportunity, even with allies, with adversaries, but in terms of specific conversations about this, I expect the State Department would be closest to those engagements. Go ahead, Karen.
Some questions on the CDC guidelines yesterday. It was obviously very big news for families.
Yes.
But the message that we heard from officials was all about families. And we didn't hear anything about school reopening tied to these guidelines. If vaccinated grandparents can be with their unvaccinated children without masks, how do you apply that same standard to schools?
Well, these guidelines were, I don't want to get over my skis here I am not a doctor, but these guidelines were very specific to what recommendations made for people's homes, right? So, Karen, you and your husband and your kids can, engage with and have dinner with your neighbors when everybody's vaccinated. That is certainly a positive step forward for many, many, many Americans. These were not guidelines for a workplace, whether it is the White House or a business or a school. There were guidelines provided, of course, for schools. And I think the CDC sees it as imperative that they take different circumstances with different, looking at the very specific engagements, the number of people, the risks as they factor in what guidelines they're going to put forward.
Guidelines as more people get vaccinated than applied to schools or applied to workplaces with these same standards?
Well, they will continue to review. As Dr. Walensky has said, as more people are vaccinated, there's a greater opportunity to make recommendations that will allow people to spend time together, to hug grandparents, cousins, teachers, and certainly that's all of our hope. But they look at all the factors, including the impact of variants, as she talked about when she rolled this out, and make recommendations based on how to keep the public safe. And there is a concern that has been raised by all of our medical experts about not taking our foot off the gas here. We are close, relatively so, given the last year we've been through, and they put out these guidelines because they feel comfortable that about the data they have as it relates to vaccinated individuals. But of course, they need to continue to analyze data, look at health and medical advice, talk to the doctors at the CDC before they make additional recommendations.
Is vaccinated. How will he change his behavior based on these guidelines? Will he see grandkids more? Will he see family in a different way than he was doing before these guidelines came out?
Of course, the president abides by the CDC guidelines, as no one would be expected to hear. But he also believes he needs to be a model for the American people and all citizens. This is a great question. I haven't talked to him about how it will impact him personally in that way. I'm happy to venture to do that, or all of you could ask him next time you have the opportunity. But I noted that, and this was a good question someone asked, I think, over the last 24 hours about how it impacts us here. And, the White House is a place of work, right? It is not a private home. And so we will continue to wear masks. We will continue to be tested. We will continue to socially distance until our health and medical experts tell us otherwise. Go ahead in the back.
Thank you, Jen. So 2 follow-ups, and